Today's breakdown video is brought to you by Grubhub. Whether you're watching the Rings of Power or other streaming favorites, Grubhub makes for a great way to tune in and take out, enjoying your favorite eats while you stream. And I personally just discovered that Amazon Prime members get Grubhub Plus for free, which means $0 delivery fees on eligible orders. Stay tuned after the breakdown to learn more. We've got a pretty busy episode this week as the battle for Eregion truly kicks off. Annatar and Celebrimbor's tension and conflict come to a head, and of course there's the kiss heard across the world. We'll dive into it all, but make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future breakdowns and Tolkien lore videos here on Nerd of the Rings. The episode opens on a beautiful morning in Eregion, a stark contrast to the destruction just beginning at the end of episode 6. Turns out this is Celebrimbor still in Annatar's forced hallucination. No doubt while he's enjoying his morning tea, there's crazy destruction happening. But he seems so at peace. I sure hope nothing bad happens to him. We see Celebrimbor using what he believes is mithril, but as we'll see later, there was indeed some Sauron shenanigans going on here. We also see him use this choppy thing, and I immediately thought back to elementary school and being paranoid about cutting my fingers off when using a paper cutter. And I bring that up for no particular reason. We'll just keep watching and totally not think about that again. We see Celebrimbor melting down the metals and finally closing the loop of the ring, and there's a flash of light as he does. A pretty solid indication he has succeeded. We cut wider and see this is indeed the 9th ring, as he has 8 others on stands. He notices a gem missing in Feanor's hammer and bends down to look for it when he sees a mouse that will come into play later. And I realized as we saw the Feanor hammer here that we never really see Celebrimbor using it in the creation process. Now, I totally get wailing away with a hammer on a small ring might not be the most realistic looking, but it would look pretty awesome. As Celebrimbor looks up, he catches his reflection in the mirror where he looks much more worse for the wear. And the room behind him is much darker than in the shot coming up, where he sees what he believes to be his true reflection. He goes on to say that with the peace and quiet he's had, the ideas can flow. And as a parent, this might just be one of the most relatable things I've ever heard. The 9 rings of power are nearly complete, and we can tell Annatar is a bit antsy for them to be finished, no doubt knowing that the battle raging outside will likely end sooner rather than later. One quick note on timing, I realized that Celebrimbor mentions feeling clarity the past weeks, which made me wonder if the siege has truly been spanning that long. It would actually kind of buck the trend of films which tend to convey sieges lasting a couple days, when real life examples you're typically talking months. As we'll see in a moment though, the fireballs are still flying thick, so maybe he means the weeks since they started forging the 7 earlier this season. Annatar says it will be a sad occasion when their work is done, and Celebrimbor says all things must end. And this made me kind of think it doesn't really for them though. They're both immortal beings, so presuming nothing bad happens to either of them, they could keep on trucking. But perhaps this is Celebrimbor operating on the assumption that Annatar will leave to distribute the 9 rings, and with his work complete, he will return to the Valar. I think it's kind of interesting when Annatar says he's enjoyed their time together because I partially believe him. Sauron, after all, was a servant of Aule, the smith of the Valar, and working alongside the greatest smith of the Second Age, learning from one another probably would be a fulfilling experience. But then his face is kind of wiped of its kindness as Celebrimbor turns his head, and I go back to, yeah, he's totally using this guy. And whatever enjoyment there is fleeting compared to that drive to rule the world. We see Adar and the orcs continuing to pelt the city with fireballs, and apparently the smoke from them is blocking out the sun so that the orcs can battle during the day. Annatar tells the elves that Celebrimbor won't permit a counterattack, and goes on to tell Merdania that Celebrimbor has gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I feel like I've said this a lot, but I continue to love seeing Annatar chip away at Celebrimbor's reputation with his people, which we'll see him take advantage of later on. Annatar says, "We are alone," and I didn't even have to wait until after the pause to think, not alone. They're interrupted as Annatar realizes the catapults have stopped, and we see them turning them toward the mountains to the north of the city. I thought this was actually really cool how they're able to use this to block the river. And I like the small detail that Annatar is way ahead of the elves in figuring out what's happening, saying, "Prepare for ground assault." So we were totally right in our trailer breakdown that the river gets blocked and we are going to have battling on the riverbed. Arondir arrives just in time to see this, and I'm not gonna lie, I was really pumped to see him arrive. I'm ready to see him in some big battle action. Back in the forge room, Celebrimbor notices Mr. Mouse again, and he's definitely starting to suspect something is amiss. We see him make a mark on a candle, a really clever way for him to see how far it burns down, or doesn't. Back in Khazad-dûm, Narvi informs the king that Eregion is under siege, but the king is all about getting the Mithril mine back up. And here Narvi fully realizes the king is full-on bonkers. Narvi comes in with his squad and reveals that they're going to stand with Durin and Disa. He knows the ring has taken the king's heart. But here's the real question. Was his posse ready to fight? And this was a surprise turn for them too? Or do you think Narvi was like, hey, let's do this. It'll totally get Durin real good. Narvi reveals there's an elf outside wanting to talk to Durin, but it's one who's been banished from all dwarf realms. And yay, we get our first Durin Elrond scene of the season. I gotta say, I've missed these guys together. I know they can't be together all the time, but man, they've got such a great dynamic and so much heart to their relationship. Honestly, it's kind of a testament to Season 2 that it's been such an improvement over Season 1, and it did so while not having these two share the screen before now. Given that they were, in my opinion, hands down the biggest highlight of Season 1, that's kind of like the show having one hand tied behind its back. These two are coming together at a great time. Well, not so great for them, but great narratively. Durin is about to overthrow his father, and Elrond is riding into a battle he knows he won't win. We then cut to Derpy Orc playing drums as the orcs move toward their ground assault. There's elves on the walls firing at the oncoming onslaught, and we see the captain yell, Hado Ifilin, translated here as loose arrows. I chuckled a little bit here because they're already firing away, and he kind of looks around like, alright, you guys got this. Now this phrase, Hado Ifilin, which can be given the literal translation of hurl the arrows, also appears in the Two Towers after the breach of Helm's Deep's wall. There, Aragorn issues the command to the elven archers with a much more rushed delivery. I do have a quick praise and a quick criticism when it comes to the battle here. I like that a lot of these shots we get a sense of space, a sense of orientation, where we can tell where the individual combatants, especially the orcs, are in relation to the city. Having noticeable parts of the wall or bridge in the background helps us to keep our bearings for the battle playing out, and to not just feel like disconnected, chaotic shots. One thing I think could have been better set up is the numbers of people on the elvish side. In all the lead up to this point, we've only ever seen small groups of anywhere from a dozen to 30 elves. I don't know if there's 100 defenders of Eregion or 1,000. Elrond in the previous scene mentions thousands of lives are at risk, but we've only seen a scattered few fleeing here and there in the previous episodes. Again, I feel like this is just missing some shots to establish where the general populace is. How many are in hiding? And how big of a defending force are we working with here? Mordania is on the wall and tells the captain they have a Ravager. We'll get to this siege instrument a bit later on when it comes into play though. Next, we're back with Celebrimbor where he points out to Annatar the pattern of the mouse running across the floor, or as I like to call it, the glitch in the Matrix. He's interrupted as he's about to point out the embers in the fire. I'm guessing he was going to point out the embers have remained the same and that he hasn't fed the fire the entire time. He then points out his clever test. The candle hasn't burned down all day long. Their conflict escalates as Celebrimbor says no emissary of the Valar would use this kind of manipulation, which seems to strike a nerve as we see that twitch in Annatar's cheek as he kinda looks back with crazy eyes. He goes on to say that he's the one keeping the storm at bay, likely referring to the battle raging outside, allowing Celebrimbor to continue working. He mentions balancing the sun above his head, and this might be reaching a bit, but it kind of made me think of the biblical story of Joshua stopping the sun. This made me wonder how long Celebrimbor's days have been. I could totally see him plugging away on these rings, pulling all-nighters because he's totally unaware. Basically, it's like how casinos trick people with no windows and being well lit 24/7, so people lose track of time and keep gambling. I also liked how Sauron's voice gets deeper and he gets more demeaning as he loses his cool. I was kind of surprised we didn't start to see the black show up around his eyes like we saw in the finale of Season 1 in the opening of this season. Celebrimbor chucks Feanor's hammer at Annatar and it crashes through a window, letting in the sounds of battle. And with that, Annatar drops the illusion as Celebrimbor goes to the balcony, witnessing the wanton destruction of his city. The way this is edited as a oneer is pretty cool. The editing nerd in me always looks for the potential seams in shots like this, and this one's pretty easy as we get a full screen shot of the CG city under attack. Still, it's a cool shot. Celebrimbor takes in the destruction of his forge room as well, and we get the weeping shot from the trailer. At the time I said it felt pretty awkward, but in context, it does feel much better. The crushing weight of the ruin of his city, the betrayal of Annatar, and probably realizing he's totally failed his people and his race is crushing down on him. After Brimby asks why, we get this shot of Annatar just staring back at him, and I really like how cold he looks here. His eyes in shadow, his face more harshly lit, and lacking the warmth we saw just a few moments ago. Celebrimbor discovers the mithril Annatar gave him last episode was actually Sauron's own blood. And this was an interesting development for me for a couple of reasons. The big question is, does this mean Sauron has put part of himself and his own power in the Nine Rings? Or was this just another way for him to put his influence over them, like we saw him do with the Seven Rings for the dwarves earlier this season? The former could bring up some lore issues. The pouring of his own power into a ring is a distinct property of the One, and I can't imagine Sauron diluting his power for rings he will distribute. This will probably remain pretty nebulous, which I think is a good thing, so my headcanon at least will be that this is just some of his blood to forge a deeper connection with the Nine. The other interesting thing is that this immediately called to mind the original filmed version of Sauron's forging in the prologue of the Fellowship of the Ring, which I recently chatted about with Luke Hawker, veteran of both film trilogies. In that original opening, Sauron stabs his own palm, which is filled with molten gold. His blood mixes with the gold and the One Ring is formed in his very hand. In fact, in the final film, you can still see the dagger in his left hand. Sauron mentions in this scene that he's learned so much from Celebrimbor, including true creation requires sacrifice. And I like that they pointed this out because I've seen some folks unfamiliar with the lore ask why Sauron needs the elves to do any of this. And the truth is that he and Celebrimbor learned from each other. Only together are they able to create these rings. So Sauron getting this idea of true creation requiring sacrifice, which could lead to him pouring so much of his own power into the One, I think is pretty cool. And finally, everything clicks into place for Celebrimbor. He finally asks the question and knows for certain, Annatar is Sauron. Now real quick, I have to note this is a pretty significant change from the books, as Celebrimbor, along with the other elves, discovers Sauron's treachery when he forges the One Ring in Mount Doom. It's this really awesome moment where those possessing the other rings of power, which are originally all intended for elves, actually hear Sauron's voice in their heads, speaking the final lines of the Ringverse about "in the darkness bind them" in Black speech. Now clearly I'm not one who shies away from calling out where I think the lore changes come at the detriment of the adaptation, but this is one I think works for this show, especially with the way things were set up and the three being forged first instead of last. I still lament the loss of what would have been a great moment of realization for Celebrimbor with the Black speech playing in his head, but these scenes between these two are really well done and incredibly well performed. It's one of those cases for me where the adaptation is just different, and I'm okay with it because I can see the why, and the deviation is good on its own merits. Celebrimbor goes outside where he sees the destruction of the courtyard and gets his bell rung by a fireball. We get a brief glimpse of one of the dogs in the courtyard, which I thought might be a nod to Huan, the Hound of Valinor, a character who's just one of the best. And I just now realized I haven't done a video dedicated to Huan and his life. That's my bad. I'm gonna fix that very soon because Huan is awesome. Anyway, I've seen some artwork over the years that depicts Huan as this type of dog, so who knows, maybe a slight nod including it here. Celebrimbor makes his way to the wall calling for Myrddania, who he tells about Annatar's deception. Unfortunately, talking about the ruby and the mouse and cutting open Annatar makes him sound kinda bonkers, and Annatar shows red blood on his hand. So basically Brimby is like, no, this guy is Sauron, and the elves are like, okay grandpa, let's get you back to your forge. But as Myrddania does that, Sauron flips his hand just as Celebrimbor throws off her hands, sending her plummeting to the orcs below. And I gotta say, I love this moment. Not because I'm like a crazy person who loves orcs killing people, but for what it shows in Sauron as a character. He's been acting all buddy-buddy, possibly even romantic toward Myrddania, and yet we see how easily he disposes of her. This is Sauron. Everyone is but a tool to him. So R.I.P. Myrdania, whose job this episode seemed to just be kind of hanging out on the wall, no armor, no weapon. I think she's just there to kind of announce things.
They're damming the river. They have a ravager.
Anyway, Myrdania makes her way to the halls of Mandos as Annatar tells Celebrimbor, finish the 9 and I'll spare your city. As he says he will use them to create a perfect and lasting peace, we hear horns as the elves of Linden show up. And this is a great time for our geography nerd deep dive, so strap in. As evidenced in last week's breakdown, I've been trying to pinpoint the geography of Eregion for a bit now. And I think I've got my head wrapped around it after getting this week's wide shots and diving even deeper into the various maps we've gotten for the show. As we established last week, there was a change at some point between maps, with Austin Ethil starting on the west of the Bruinen, then later appearing close to the Glanduin, close to the midway point of Eregion. Looking at the newer map as the siege started, I thought this was pretty straightforward. Adar and the orcs are across the river, Elrond must have crossed around behind the city, coming to Khazad-dûm before arriving from the north, traveling on the south side of the river in order to fight Adar. However, looking at the city, we see the river flow left to right, and Adar turns his catapults to the left to block the flow. The problem here is that the river Glanduin flows the opposite direction, originating in the Misty Mountains. Also, as we compare the shots looking out from the city wall and looking across the river at the city, the Misty Mountains are definitely behind the city, which doesn't seem to jive with this map. I was determined to figure this out and wondered if maybe the location was tweaked again for the in-show presentation. And sure enough, we see in Season 1, Episode 2 that Austin Ethil is now placed south of the Glanduin. Finally, things clicked into place. Mostly. This makes the flow of the river check out, the Misty Mountains in the background check out, and means Elrond went to Khazad-dûm behind the orc forces, then returned to his forces, who attack from the northwest. It also checks out as later we see the sunrise in the east, being to Elrond's right as he stands in the riverbed looking away from the city. Unfortunately, this does raise one fairly significant issue tactically speaking. It means that Adar and the orcs apparently crossed the Glanduin at some point in order to attack Eregion from across the river, rather than simply attacking from the south. Alright, geography nerdery aside, we see the orcs form ranks as the elves arrive and Gil-galad is with them, but nods to Elrond to lead the charge. And upon rewatch, I was really surprised how little Gil-galad we see in the fight scenes. Later on, Elrond expresses his dismay at the High King showing up, so I guess he's hanging back and Elrond is leading the charge alone. Now real quick, this shot of Gil-galad I think gives us the best view of the fact that the chest plate has a tree with both gold and silver represented. Like Galadriel's dagger in Season 1, this is a reference to the two trees of Valinor, the source of light prior to their destruction by Morgoth. The orcs reveal Galadriel in the cage and Elrond issues the Sindarin elvish command, Daro, meaning halt or stop. And we get this shot of the orcs in the shade, which is helpful because I had been thinking these orcs don't mind the sun so much all of a sudden. We can see it peeking from behind the close-up orc face screaming toward the camera a few shots ago. I guess we're supposed to think the smoke from the trebuchet fireballs is still clouding the sky. I wonder if it might have been better if we saw Annatar helping the haze to stick around or something. This is, after all, something we know Sauron does to favor his orcs in the Third Age. So it would have made sense to have that connection here, I think. The elves avoid a 1,000-horse pileup and Elrond goes to Adar's camp to negotiate. And I really like this moment where Adar says Elrond is more suited to wielding a scroll than a sword, and Elrond claps back, "You've never seen me wield either." Elrond and Adar go back and forth, with Elrond pointing out Adar is doing Sauron's will by attacking Eregion, and Adar says the city belongs to Sauron now. I gotta say, pretty flimsy argument by Adar here. Does he expect the elves to join in killing other elves? Not a great plan. Adar then goes on to name drop Melian, a hugely important First Age character and Elrond's great-great-grandmother. He's like, Elrond, you're a handsome dude, but I hope you also inherited her wisdom. Now he says Melian of the Valar in this scene, and initially I thought they were saying Melian herself is a Vala, when she is in fact a Maya, a being lower than the Valar, the same kind of being as characters like Gandalf and Sauron. However, I realized a couple things diving deep into the books. One is that the word Maya and its plural form Maiar are not mentioned in The Lord of the Rings, meaning Amazon likely doesn't have the rights to use this term. However, I think Adar's phrase can be interpreted as Melian being of the Valar, as in a servant of the Valar, as all Maiar are at some point. In fact, the one time Melian is mentioned in all of the Lord of the Rings, she's referred to as Melian of the people of the Valar, meaning she is indeed among those who serve them. While we're on the topic of Elrond's ancestry, it may interest you to know that while he is referred to as half-elven, he's actually 56.25% elf, 37.5% human, and 6.25% Maiar. And yes, Melian was quite wise. Let's just say King Thingol is much better off when he listens to his wife. Also, while Adar hopes that Elrond has inherited Melian's wisdom, it would actually make more sense for Galadriel too. While Elrond never met his great-great-grandmother, Galadriel would spend much of the First Age with Melian learning from her, including things like the making of lembas bread. Okay, back to the show. Elrond calls Adar on his crap, pointing out how he's throwing away the lives of his children so casually. Elrond refuses to trade Galadriel for the ring and takes off his brooch as he passes Adar and has his back turned. And watching Glug's reaction here, I think he definitely saw this, but he's definitely not digging having Adar as a leader so much lately. So he actually says Elrond is unarmed when he wishes to say goodbye to Galadriel. And then we get the kiss heard round the world. Actually, technically speaking, Middle-earth is flat prior to the fall of Numenor, so I guess it's the kiss heard across the world. And yeah, I'm gonna get a little controversial, I guess, here and admit I'm not a fan of Elrond kissing his mother-in-law. That's pretty weird to me. Now, obviously he's approaching Galadriel in order to hand over the brooch so she can escape later. We can see the handoff right here in the wide shot. And in my mind, that's the single solitary thing that makes this kiss make the slightest bit of sense. That being said, I can't go so far as to say it excuses it. Feel free to fire back in the comments, but I struggle to believe that this was somehow the best development in these two characters' relationship. Or that the show was backed into a corner and the only solution was to bring the Twilight vibes to Middle-earth. And if only there was another character who would be gut-wrenching to see Elrond leave behind. What a world that would be if Tolkien had given these characters spouses to share these moments with. Dripping sarcasm aside, I came to the realization between seasons that I think Galadriel's character in the show would actually work significantly better most of the time if you think of her as Elrond's wife, Celebrian. And this moment just kind of clicked that even more into place for me. Anyway, on with the show. Galadriel gives Elrond a look like, hey, you're a good kisser. I'd totally let you marry my daughter if I had one. Okay, that was the last one. Moving on. Good thing orcs are dumb and don't speak Elvish, because Elrond tells the assistant to the commander that the dwarves are summoning an army to help out. We also learn that the orcs have 10 times the number of soldiers. I can't say I would have guessed that without this guy telling me that though. Back in Khazad-dûm, we get Durin getting the dwarves hyped for battle, during which we get a shot of Galadriel using the brooch to pick the lock of her shackles. We also see Celebrimbor continuing to toil away on the 9 rings, with his own shackle on his arm. He refers to Annatar as Sauron's Stoneheart, so Elrond must have filled in his buddy during his visit. I really like the term Sauron Stoneheart though. Stealing the 7 smithing secrets from their forebears is something original to the show, so I don't have anything deeper to go into there. Though based on season 1, I'm guessing one of the secrets was alloys. I thought it was interesting here that Durin clearly knows and is announcing to everyone that the rings are made to enslave Middle-earth. With that information, as I brought up last week, I don't know how the show can justify these rings getting passed down through generations as they do, much less them ever being used again. It's kind of an odd byproduct, I think, of making the dwarf ring of Durin III more corrupting than it probably should have been. I actually really like Durin's speech here. Thinking back to season 1, there were so many times when it felt episodes just arrived at a insert pre-battle speech here moment, and I think it's a testament to how much better season 2 is that Durin's speech here feels like it is needed, deserved, organic, and executed well. The dwarves are riled and start chanting Baruch Khazad, a battle cry of the dwarves meaning axes of the dwarves. This is often followed by the phrase Khazad Imenu, meaning the dwarves are upon you. Elrond and the elves are fighting and it's all out chaos. I do kind of wish we had some bigger establishing shots so we had a better orientation on where he is in relation to Adar's camp and Eregion right before this. And there's a lot of elves not on horses, Why are so many fighting on foot now? This made me feel like maybe the battle has been trimmed down, and we're missing some scenes that transition from an attack order to here, where it's in the middle of the battle. Then Elrond's horse gets killed, and all I wanted in this moment was for Beric to show up and start murdering orcs left and right, with the kind of vengeance that would impress Liam Neeson. Fortunately, Elrond unleashes righteous fury on the derpy orc. We see some battle shots of orcs climbing ladders and making progress on the wall. Then we see the Ravager at work, which involves orcs hammering in anchors, then the contraption pulls parts out of the wall. I tried looking up historic siege engines to see if there was some real-world inspiration for this, but everything I found either throws things or hits things really hard. I'd love any medieval historians in the crowd to let me know if there's something that did this in real life. Back in the orc camp at night, they're taking a breather from the battle, and Glug and Adar have a heart-to-heart moment, and Adar says he loves them too much to see them become Sauron's slaves. So Adar is clearly operating under that assumption that if Sauron creates all his rings, that the orcs will just fall in line under him because of that magic. This was something Sauron in Halbrand form told him in episode 1, and Adar clearly bought into that lie. Adar discovers 2 dead orcs and that Galadriel has escaped using Elrond's brooch. Galadriel sneaks through the orc camp in one of their dragonskin cloaks that we saw in season 1. She's forced toward the orc funeral pyres. Clearly meat is not on the menu here. Adar gives a little prayer for the dead, saying, "In flames they return to darkness." And it was here that I kind of realized, oh yeah, I guess Adar is still loyal to Morgoth, just not Sauron. In all the ways he has elven tendencies, he's still been decidedly a bad guy, but I never pondered his theology, I guess. He really just has beef with Sauron, it would seem, and still serves and has faith in Morgoth. I would just think that the whole "we just want to live in peace" thing is a pretty non-Morgothian outlook. Galadriel gets saved from the orcs who catch on to her by Arondir, and I was really happy to see him pop up, but also kind of wondering what he's been up to. He arrived hours ago when they blocked the river. Anyway, I love this moment between he and Galadriel. He's ready to give up his own life for revenge, and Galadriel says there's a dearth of elven heroes this night. It would be a pity to lose another. This is a really great moment of Galadriel giving encouragement and showing care and wisdom that I think we could really use more of in this series. Back in Khazad-dûm, we see there are, by my count, 15 regiments or battalions or whatever the proper term would be here, of dwarves outside the mountain ready to march to Eregion. Durin the Fourth is armored up for war and is interrupted by Narvi, who is sporting a wicked head wound. He says the king is attacking his own men, cutting them down like wheat, and that Disa says to recall the army. It also sounds like they're certain that Durin is about to unleash the Balrog too. In the moment, I kind of thought recalling the whole army seems kind of extreme. Like surely if they brought like 50 or heck even 100, they could subdue the king? Unless the ring is like giving the king the power of Thor or something. Back in Eregion, Annatar watches over Celebrimbor while he works, saying how much it pains him to treat him like this. And I really love Celebrimbor's delivery of the line, "like you've treated countless others." Totally calling him out on his crap here. Then Sauron goes for the "woe is me," saying it's like Morgoth treated him. He goes on to say that what Morgoth wished to destroy, Sauron wishes to perfect. And this is actually a great succinct summary of the differences in their approach. I think the idea that Sauron was some miserable captive being tortured by Morgoth is pushing the pity party a bit too far, but the differences between their approaches, destruction versus order by force, is noteworthy and well summarized. The book version is much more a case of Sauron, Morgoth's second in command, taking over after his master's downfall and bringing his own management style to Middle-earth. Sauron goes on to basically victim blame Celebrimbor, saying how he forced Sauron to do this, and it's all Celebrimbor's fault. And Brimby comes in with another dynamite line saying, "Truly you are the great deceiver. You can deceive even yourself." It's a really good line. Brimby finishes the 9th ring after Sauron leaves and decides to try to destroy them, throwing them into the fire. Back on the battlefield, we see the Linden elves fighting in the riverbed, and the Eregion elves throwing these exploding barrels. I couldn't help but think they should have totally used these when the battle started and when their friends weren't also out there. But I gotta admit, exploding barrels do not look as cool during the day. Back in the forge, Celebrimbor pulls the 9 out of the furnace and discovers they are not hot. Obviously, this is something we see when Gandalf and Frodo test the One Ring in Bag End. In that very chapter of the Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf hints at all rings of power being difficult to destroy when he talks of what it would take to destroy the One. "But there is no smith's forge in this shire that could change it at all. Not even the anvils and furnaces of the dwarves could do that. It has been said that dragonfire could melt and consume the rings of power, but there is not now any dragon left on earth in which the old fire is hot enough. Nor was there ever any dragon, not even Ankaragon the Black, who could have harmed the One Ring, the ruling ring, for that was made by Sauron himself. Unable to destroy them, Celebrimbor puts them in a pouch and makes to free himself from his shackle. And remember what I said about paper cutters? Yeah, Celebrimbor just plays out your elementary school nightmare and chops his thumb off. Personally, I think I would have tried dislocating it first, but this way certainly gets the job done. Celebrimbor proves whose will is mightier and escapes the building, and for the second time gets dazed by a flying rock. The same elf captains we've seen running around the block here move to take Celebrimbor back to the forge when Galadriel shows up. And I really liked her putting these elves in their place, putting some respect on Celebrimbor's name. I really love the lines about it not being strength that overcomes darkness, but light, and how in its presence darkness must flee. And as we see a few shots of the battle raging on, I just thought how glad I was to be getting this beautiful Tolkienian message that Rings of Power was conveying on its own. It would have been quite easy for them to slip into copying something like Sam's monologue from The Two Towers, and I'm really glad they didn't. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, Charles Edwards is just a fantastic actor. He was not at all what I pictured for Celebrimbor, and I was kind of hesitant about his casting. His Celebrimbor may not be what I ever pictured, but he is really, really good, and has created a character, especially this season, that has been a true highlight. This is the last we see of him in episode 7, but I truly cannot wait to dive into the conclusion of Annatar and Celebrimbor in the finale. Back in the battle, Hawkeye Elf gets Boromir'd, but summons the strength to shoot one last arrow to blow up something that was in a bucket on the siege engine. She gets shot with one more arrow for good measure and falls to the ground. And I kinda thought, oh no, that one girl died. Back in the orc camp, Adar sends in Damrod, despite the fact that Glug says the troll will kill their own kind. And I kinda thought, could you ask him not to though? They're on the same side after all. You'd think that would be the bare minimum for an alliance. Back inside, we get the trailer scene where the elf guard surround Sauron. The Dark Lord makes the captain stop mid-sentence, saying, "You think it was only you who put yourself in my power?" And as I predicted from the trailer, he makes all the guards stab and kill each other. He then dispatches with the captain and demands the Nine once again. Damrod makes his grand entrance, and I gotta say, the orc shield is hilarious and awesome. He picks up 2 orcs and uses them to block arrows being shot at him, and I got a really good chuckle seeing this for the first time. Damrod flings Elrond to the side before getting a gut punch from the siege engine. In this and the previous scene, we get to see Arondir firing his bow like crazy and doing his part to help take down the troll, and I gotta say my interest level in the battle as a whole definitely bumps up a notch when Arondir shows up. He's a cool dude. Gil-galad shows up with some of his soldiers, and together he, Elrond, and Arondir manage to take down the troll. Real quick, I gotta say the edit was kinda odd to me when Gil-galad rides forward with his spear and then thrusts down, apparently giving the killing blow. We don't see Gil-galad and Damrod in the frame together at all from him charging to Damrod dying. We get a small glimpse of his horse afterwards in the bird's eye shot, but it just felt really disjointed to me, the way it felt like 2 unrelated shots of the stab and Damrod's reaction. It felt like we needed a different angle or an additional shot here. I gotta say though, we needed way more Gil-galad in this fight. I know he isn't in this battle in the books, but if he's there, I want to see him wielding that spear like an elf possessed. As the orcs amass for a final assault, we've got about 28 surviving elves, at least that's what I counted when I paused my screen. Not a great survival rate, I must say. As the sun rises, Elrond points to a hill saying, "The dwarves are coming." And as much as it sucks that they, didn't, I was kind of glad that they went against what happens, a lot, where reinforcing armies show up at sunrise by cresting a hill. Surely coming around a corner would be cool too, right? Maybe at moonrise? I don't know, just saying. The messenger says Durin recalled his army and that the gate of Khazad-dûm is shut. In disbelief, Elrond says repeatedly, "Durin will come." And the messenger guy is probably like, "That's nice you think that, dude, but I got 2 freaking arrows in my back." A quick note, the phrasing of the messenger saying the gate of Khazad-dûm is shut could be a slight nod to the timeline in the appendices, which lists the events for the fall of Eregion, among which is the gate of Moria is shut. Notably, once the doors of Durin are shut in 1697 of the Second Age, they would not open again from the outside until the Fellowship of the Ring comes to them nearly 5,000 years later. We see a face-off moment as Adar and Arondir make their way toward one another, and Adar catches an arrow, showing he still has his elven reflexes. He uses that very arrow to stab Arondir, who stabs him with another arrow, before Adar stabs Arondir with his sword. And at this point, I'm thinking, if Arondir dies, I'm gonna be super bummed. They don't show him die though, so I think he's probably gonna be okay, at least until the next episode. The orcs finally break down the wall and start pouring into the city, as Elrond is being super unhelpful on the battlefield. Adar comes right up to him and picks him up by the neck, tossing him away and obtaining Nenya, Galadriel's Ring of Power. He says to Elrond, "Have you forgotten your Rúmil?" Again, Rúmil being the inventor of written letters in the lore, and who Círdan earlier this season called a poet and a drunkard. Adar shares the quote, "Do not make war in anger." And I was like, that sounds like it should be from something. So I went on a bit of a Google rabbit hole, and the closest I found was a quote from The Art of War by Sun Tzu. "The ruler may not move his army out of anger. The general may not do battle out of wrath." So there you go, we are just one episode left of season 2. Adar's got Galadriel's ring, Galadriel has the 9 rings, and Celebrimbor has 9 fingers. The elves are looking in pretty not great shape. I think overall this was another pretty strong episode, especially if we block the kiss from our memory banks. I have not the strength to discuss that incident more, the terror is still too near. But I gotta say, I'm really looking forward to what's in store for Celebrimbor and Annatar. It's been my favorite storyline of the season thus far, and I'm itching to see the conclusion play out. But the final confrontation between Sauron and Celebrimbor is pretty epic and kind of violent in the books, so I'm eager to see what they do with it. I'm expecting it to be a bit different given where the chips are here, but I'll say no more. If you want to hear about that, check out my video on Celebrimbor, where I recount his entire life, including his time in places like Gondolin and his famous ancestors. But what did you think about episode 7? Let me know in the comments. While during our watch parties, I watched the new Rings of Power episodes on my computer, for my rewatches, I like to experience it on my Nerd Cave projector screen. And recently, my family and I have enjoyed watching our favorite streaming shows, while also enjoying some local favorite restaurants with Grubhub and Prime Video's Tune In and Takeout. As I mentioned earlier, Amazon Prime members get Grubhub Plus for free, so there's $0 delivery fees on eligible orders. And with us being in the thick of Rings of Power Season 2, which means a lot of time spent on writing these breakdown videos, it's pretty great for this sleep-deprived nerd to not have to worry about what to fix for dinner after a long night of the Lord of the Rings deep dives. Enjoy your own fellowship feast with Grubhub Plus.